Welcome back to Chalk Talk with Coach Flo, Head Coach's Corner. Uh, Jerry Flora again, coming back at you on the Super Bowl weekend. Good to have you back, representing Kane University Cougars today in our clinic. We're going to be talking about special teams this week. We spent the last 2 weeks talking about offense and going to change it off a little bit, and want to try and get to everybody as best we can. So appreciate those that have subscribed to this channel so far. Please remember to subscribe to the channel. I'd like you to like as well the post, and then hit the little bell for future videos. Try and do like one video a week, different topics. So this week we'll talk about special teams. Next week we'll dive a little bit more into it. It'll be a 2-week segment, and then we'll move on to something else. Talk about practice organization, talk about philosophy, talk about a lot of different things. But before I start, I want to introduce my assistant, Frankie. Come here. This guy right here is behind the scenes in this whole thing, putting this whole thing together. This is my son, Frankie Flora, and he's done everything. Done a great job with the video and the design and the artwork. So, Frank, say hi to everybody.
Hi.
Very personable. Thanks, Frank. Once again, as we discussed earlier, we'd like you to drop a comment in the comment section under the video. If you do that before next week, we'll say next Saturday, and you'll qualify for a free giveaway that we'll send you just for getting involved and taking a look and see what we have to offer. Once again, if you're new to this, as I've said in the 2 weeks prior, I've had the opportunity to work in higher ed for about 28 years, coaching-wise. I started my coaching career off at Iona College, where I played offensive tackle for 4 years, played tight end my senior year, coached at a number of schools, coached 1AA, coached Division III, been a head coach, been an offensive coordinator, been a special teams coordinator, been a recruiting coordinator, pretty much every possible aspect of a program, with the exception of the defensive coordinator, and I'm sure I probably could do that as well too. So just an opportunity now, as I kind of reflect back on my career and the time I've spent coaching young men in college, just an opportunity to share with you some of the stuff that I've learned. These videos are a little bit more in depth than your normal clinic videos. One thing I always wasn't sure, like, I love clinics and stuff, but sometimes you go to a clinic and they just give you the generic stuff. Like, they're talking about inside zone, they talk about, they don't get in depth. I don't have a problem showing you plays, going over stuff that I've done in the past, and so on and so forth. I got handouts here that I'm going to show you as well, put up in front of the screen. If you want copies of stuff, whatever the case is, like I said, just comment or make a note. We'll exchange contact information, and I'll get you whatever you need. Once again, I'm not claiming that I know more than the next guy, but I can tell you one thing. I've researched all this stuff. I've spent an extensive amount of time, worked for some great head coaches, had some great assistant coaches, and better than that, I've had some awesome players. That's kind of made a lot of this stuff fly. So we're going to get right into it today. We're going to talk about special teams. Obviously, they talk about special teams being a third of the game. There's a good possibility tomorrow in the Super Bowl there will be a play or two that will be the difference in the game, and it won't have to do with offense and defense. Usually a punt return, a punt block, maybe a fake field goal, a fake punt. There's always something that goes on special teams wise. And I'm when I first started coaching, before I became an offensive coordinator and head coach, I always took a lot of pride in special teams. I always believed that special teams was a major facet of the game. Offensive guy. When you're an offensive coordinator, you focus just on the offensive guys. You're trying to pull together a depth chart, but you're focusing on, say, if there's 100 guys in the roster, you're 40 guys. If you're the defensive guys, you're worried about your 40 guys. If you're the special teams guy, you're worried about all 100 guys. I always thought that good special teams coordinators could become and would become good NFL or good college head coaches or NFL head coaches, just because they gotta be able to evaluate everyone in the roster. They gotta be able to have dialogue with everyone in the roster, so it's just not certain people that you're dealing with. They got to be fine-tuned. They don't have a lot of time. You got to be really organized. You got to be detail-oriented. You got to really be fine-tuned. And I think those, you'll see probably in the next 10 years. Look at the Giants situation with their new head football coach. You got coach. You got the head football coach down at the Baltimore Ravens. So you got some guys that have been that were special teams guys that have become head coaches, and you'll probably see it a little bit in college too. So what we're talking about today basically is a couple things. I'm gonna break it down. I know last week we said we want to try and keep it to 30 minutes, but I've been trying to be very elaborate too. So I think in the last 2 weeks we've averaged about a 40-minute video. So we're going to try and stay in that 30 to 40-minute range. We're going to talk about practice organization for special teams. We're going to talk about scouting report. I'm going to show you a couple of variations of scouting reports that I use both at Iona College when I worked for Coach Mariani, and at William Patterson when I worked for both Coach Rico and Coach Miela. Then we'll talk about our Indy session and how elaborate that was. That I got from someone else. I actually got it when I was working for Coach Mariani at Iona, and I loved it. And once again, you talk about being detail oriented and the least amount of time you have to do something. And then we're going to talk about punt. We may not get into the variations, but we're going to talk about a basic spread punt, the basic blocking to an even front, an overload, both right and left. And then if we don't get to it, the next week's presentation will start with the variations to it, which is a lot of the stuff you see now in 2020, where teams go spread punt and teams go trips, they go tray, they're doing the shield punt, they're doing the rugby punt, they're doing all those types of things. So that'll be the last piece if we get to it. So really quick, just kind of starting at the top here with number one for practice organization. Very critical that you're prepared for practice. I remember, when I was at William Patterson in 02, 03, and 04 with Coach Rico, Coach was good enough to give me time to have special teams meetings, to meet with the staff. We assigned staff members positions. So although I may have been the special teams coordinator, we gave everybody on the staff something to kind of hold their own. So Eric Neely, who's a perfect example, Eric played for Coach Rico, started coaching at William Patterson in 02, assisted me a lot with the special teams, especially punt. He kind of took it on to the next level, where he got hired at Washington State with Coach Leach, where he at some point became his special teams coordinator. And you can see how detail oriented he is. Now he's obviously a running backs coach, and he's gotten away from that, but still working for Coach Leach. So the practice is important. So what we used to do is we'll do punt, kickoff, and field goal block. Those may have been more, or actually no, sorry, punt, kickoff, and say field goal, and then you had punt return, kick return, and field goal extra point block, and then you had your hands teams. So for punt, you'd have two coaches. You'd have two coaches. One guy would be the head coach for punt. You'd have two coaches for kickoff. One would be the head coach for kickoff. You'd have two coaches, same thing. You do that for every team. And the reason why you have two coaches is you have one guy that's he kind of helps out. So I may be introducing punt that day, or I may allow him to introduce punt. If he introduces punt, the other guy's in charge of the scout team. So you always have somebody, because it's hard because you don't get a lot of time. So it's hard. Like if I put someone in charge of punt, and then he's dealing with the punt team, and he's going over the scheme for the day and maybe setting up the team. Well, you need someone on the other side, telling those 11 guys with the cards where they're supposed to line up, because you don't have a lot of time. You got to get two teams done in 15 minutes. And I'll tell you what, time flies. When you're on that field and you're teaching and you're learning and you're engaged with young men, that 15 minutes flies. Trust me. we'll have a 2-hour practice at William Patterson. The 10 years I was the head football coach, 205, 210. You know, we're allotting 30 to 40 minutes to special teams. So that's from a special teams organization standpoint, some of the variations. I'll get into that in a second. So time-wise, from a practice schedule standpoint, what we used to do, and you know, we did a little bit of this at Iona. I brought her with me to William Patterson in 02, 03, and 04. And then I in 05 when Coach Miello came on board, I kind of took a back seat to it. Coach Katz had taken over our special teams, and I helped out a little bit more with the offense with Coach Miello, which at some point it then helped me become an offensive coordinator. So usually spend about 10 minutes pre-practice for specialists. So practice starts at 4 o'clock, or specialists are on the field at 3:50. And the guys that are included in the specialists with anyone that touches the ball from a special team. So punters, kickers, holders, snappers, field goal kickers. Always the quarterbacks and centers were on the field at that time. You know, snapping, working on shotgun snaps, working on under center snaps. So you know, although practice started at 4, we called that pre-practice, and that was 3:50. So no one was expected to be on the field prior to 3:50. 3:50 was where you started. And then from there, the official practice started at 4. So like what you got at 3:50 is you got punters warming up, punting short punts to returners. And when I mean short punts, you know, not crazy, maybe 20 yards, one-step punt. You know, and we got returners just work on catching. You know, until those punters get warmed up, and they tell those returners to back up. You know, you had kickers. If you had enough guys, same thing, short kicks. You know, short kicks would be like a sky kick. Put the ball down, you know, 1 or 2 steps, you know, maybe 30 yards. Just working on form, getting loose. Returners working on catch and taking off. We didn't expand that because of field. So we never, you know, we made the punters extend their leg, but we never really did that for the kickoff guys because you needed a little bit more field. When you had the punt guys going, you had snappers also snapping to the punt guys. So you had snappers snapping to the punt guys. You had your short snappers down the other end of the field. And they made them short snapping to holders, and you had kickers. So you had to have everyone out there. So it's tough when you have your field goal kicker is also your kickoff guy, or maybe your punter is your holder. Because a lot of times you see that your punter, maybe your holder. So you gotta try and change up how you do your practice. So maybe for pre-practice one day, on day 1, you're only doing field goal, and maybe you're having returners catch punts, and you're doing kickoff because your punter is part of your field goal team. You know, and then the next day you do punt, and now you do kickoff. So you got to try and figure it out, because at the end of the day, even though you want to try and get as much as you can done, you don't want to spread yourself thin and make it ineffective. You still want to make it effective. So you got your 10-minute pre-practice time, and then you start practice. And what we typically did was we then went through a walkthrough. So we would have our meetings, and then we would walk through for 10 minutes. So we'd walk through everything we talked about in the meeting that we may have been doing differently that day offensively. At that point, our kickers and holders and all those guys, if they were specialist guys, they were on the side stretching out, continue to work a little bit, maybe kicking into nets, stuff like that. Then right after that, right after your walkthrough, we would go to stretch. We go to some sort of dynamic stretch, some sort of warm-up, and then right out of that, typically, before we went to anything else, we go to field extra point. So you have 5 minutes of field extra point. And you know, 5 minutes, if you're organized, you legitimately can get 10 kicks in. Now, mind you, we were a muddle huddle team too, so we had the swing gate where we'd line up a group of guys to the left. You'd have your snapper, your holder, and your kicker, and then you'd have a wing out to the right. So, you know, what we have to do is on those days we were going to do what we call muddle huddle. We just did muddle huddle. Maybe got 1 or 2 kicks in. Because to set it all up and set up a defense takes a lot of time. So we did our field extra point. And typically what we did on Mondays was we'd put the ball down in the middle of the field if we were doing extra point. We'd line up our team. We'd get a defense out there. And, you know, a lot of times we were in helmets or uppers. So what we would do is we would just have the defense, take 1 or 2 steps across. We were just working on getting the kinks out from the past game, working on the timing. If we had multiple kickers, we gave each guy 2 cracks at it on Monday. But we try to take, we usually carry 2 kickers, so we do four kicks in the middle of the field. And then we'd move to the left hash 5 and do 4 kicks. And then move to the right hash 8. And then we would come back to the middle 10. And you can do it any way you want. We just did it in increments, so we were moving the field. And then we, tell the defense, hey, listen, we want a wide rush here, maybe because the ball was on the right hash, and we put the ball on the left hash, we want a wide rush over here. And, the defensive guys, they get in their stance like they're coming off the ball, and they take 1 or 2 steps. And our line was down, listening for the call, and they would take their steps, and they would just stand there and punch. So it wasn't really an aggressive thing. It was more so for the operation. We'd always had a coach in the back on a stopwatch. There was a certain time that we were looking for from organization point. So, I'll get into that a little bit more at another point. That's in a lot of the manuals I have. So, they would click it, and you're trying to stay on time and stuff like that. And you rotate your snappers in, and, you want to try and rotate as many guys as you can. I mean, I could tell you, the hardest thing about being a special teams coordinator is not the time of getting everything done, time on task. It's the fact that you literally have to have 3 deep built in. They always talk about that depth chart about being starters and backups. In special teams, you got to go 3 deep because a lot of guys are on a lot of teams. A lot of your starters, I mean, we put 60, maybe 60% of the teams were our starters. And then the backups were on teams. And then you had the thirds, that were 1 step away from getting on the football field. So they were in there. So, for example, if your starting safety got hurt or needed a blow and you had to take him out, now you had to put his backup in. Now the 3rd string guy became the backup, just like that. So now you got to adjust that. And then what happens if that 3rd string guy gets hurt? Now you don't have a backup. So you always had to make sure that you had an interchangeable part. So if you had a right gunner, he had to make sure he knew how to run from the left side too. So it wasn't just like a guy says, well, coach, I can only play on the right side. Now you had to make sure that you had, I mean, we would use probably from a participation standpoint with the report, we'd have to use close to 40 guys on Saturday for special teams. Even if it's just 1 play, 40 guys were going. And people say all the time, well, you got 100 guys. Man, holy cow, that's a lot of guys. Well, in reality, it's not really. From a college standpoint, because it's more specialized than in high school. So in college, your D-line, your nose tackle is your nose tackle. In high school, he may also be your right tackle. Your quarterback in high school may be a strong safety. In college, he's your quarterback. So what made it hard was, you literally were like, if you think about it, you'd have 22 guys on offense, starters and backups. So, I was rounded up to 30 just for extras. You do that on defense, that's 60. You got your 40 guys left now, really, for special teams. So, so I always thought, if you get to 120, 125 on your roster, then you had your developmental guys. Because the issue was, if you had that extra 40 guys, let's say 20 of them were developmental guys and they weren't ready to play yet, now you're playing guys that aren't ready to play college ball, and they're in the mix with special teams, which I just said earlier, may make or break a game just like that. So you want to make sure, if you got a guy out there and they're punting the ball from the 50 and it's the last possession of the game and his heels are on the 10-yard line and he's waiting for the return, and this is the last drive, you got to go down and score. You need a guy down there that's going to catch the punt, not fumble it. You need a guy that's not going to step back and catch it on the 2, and now you're going out from your 2-yard line. I can tell you, being an offensive coordinator, calling plays inside the 2, a lot different than calling from the 10. So just something to think about. So you got your pre-practice, you got your field goal extra point. We go into Indy, we do offense, maybe we do offense, defense, tough a lot. Then we get to our Indy period for special teams. So people always, used to try and cut that out to try and give it to something else. Well, it's just like everything else. If you're practicing a certain punt and game day, you can't practice the team part of it if you don't practice the Indy part of it. So I'll talk about that in a second, how we did that with the scout TCU period. And then you had your group period. You had 15 minutes. You had to get 2 teams done. So you had a 15-minute window, and you had to figure out that day, if you were going to do punt, kick, return, how much minutes was punt getting? How much was kick return getting? Punt may get 8, kick return may get 7. Punt may get 10 that day, kick return may get 5. And then you got to realize you got to be organized because there's transition time. So when you blow that whistle at the 8-minute mark and say, okay, you blow the whistle, you say kick return, come on out. A lot of the same players aren't out there. So now what happens is you're going to lose time if you're not organized. So the coaches that are in charge of those teams, the head special teams guy, any of your student workers, any grad assistants, they're hustling all over the field, setting up new drills, ready to go, setting up the new team, getting the scout guys, giving them the helmet pennies to put on, all that stuff. Because if you figure, if you have a 15-minute time slot and the first 8 is for punt, and now you switch to kick return, now you're using the whole field. So by the time you get to your time, you may only have 5 minutes left. You may have wasted 2 minutes in transition. So it's important, critical. So 30 to 40 minutes a day was spent on special teams. And a lot of coaches would say, well, that's not ideal, but you figure if it's a third of the game, and as we got through the week, we got later in the week, once we got to Thursday was a big review day. So I'll talk about Thursday in a second. So that's kind of the practice organization. That's for the day. And then, at the end, if we had to have some concerns or whatever, we need to talk to people. Occasionally, like sometimes, like during game week or even during camp, we may do a situational period on offense where everyone knows it's all hands on deck. So it may be a move the ball 1st and 10 offense and defense. And if we don't get the first down, we're calling the punt team. So we're asking for the whole punt team to come out. We may ask the defense just to stay out there for safe punt so that we're not scrambling for defensive guys. Or let's say it was a long pass and it was a touchdown, we may call for the field goal team. So those are types of things that we did during practice. Okay, so we're just going to erase this. All right, so we talked about this. Now we go to scout report, second. All right, so I got to try and speed up a little bit here because I know we're about halfway through. So you got to be prepared scout report wise. So what I'm going to show you is, when I was the special teams coordinator at Iona for Coach Mariani, this is an example special teams scout report. It's pretty intense. You can see. I mean, it was in color at one point. We got the guy's name up here in the top right-hand corner. You always put the name on. Why? Because when it ends up in the locker room on the floor, now you can say, hey, listen, hey Joe Schmo, where's your scouting report? Oh, it's back in my room. And you say, well, I found it on the floor in the locker room. So we always put their name on the top, and it's pretty in depth. I mean, this is a good 15 pages. This is the Division I AA, scouting report for special teams. You have your stats maybe from last week. You have our top guys with their pictures. This is something that I'm putting together. Some stats, and then you break down every team. Punt, you break down our punt versus their punt return. Then you do our punt return versus their punt, and you do that for every team. And every player gets one of these. When I was at William Patterson, this is an example of what the scout report looked like at William Patterson. Same type of deal. You can see this is against Montclair State. So, you change it up, you throw a little quote there on the bottom. Obviously, this was in color when we gave it out to the players. Same type of deal. You got illustrations. You really want the players to buy in. You give them a scout report. They know what the deal is. They know when they're practicing. Because some guys are just specialists their first year. So that's their bread and butter. And what I've seen a lot of times being a head coach is you have guys that are tweeners. In Division III, there's no red shirt like Division I. So you got 4 years to play. So a lot of these guys, it takes them maybe 6 or 7 weeks to get going offensively. Well, during that time, they're playing special teams. And now all of a sudden, maybe they get a break in week 5 and they get on the field in week 6. We see guys, a perfect example is Joe Hernandez, who played for us a few years ago from Cresskill, was an inside linebacker, and he was behind a really good linebacker for us at the time. And, he was on every special teams and hard worker and, hustler and freshman, the whole 9 yards, made rookie of the week a couple weeks. And our starter got hurt. We found out we were playing TCNJ down at TCNJ. It was a big win for our program. We won 21-0. And oddly enough, we ended up starting a freshman. But he was ready because he had done special teams for 6 weeks. So he played in varsity games. So that's what you got about scouting reports. You also get a little bit crazy. You know, I always had a special teams playbook. What I did here at Iona was, you'll see here, this is my special teams playbook, philosophy, personnel, and stats. So this one was always set up where, you know, we had our philosophy in here. Every player got one. There was a table of contents. It talked about all the different teams, all the kicking game rules, so on and so forth. And then it gave you a lot of stats at the end. So there's another handout. You know, obviously, if you're interested in some of this information, I can get it to you. So, you know, have all these different things. So what we used to do is we used to give out a special teams playbook that looked like this. We used to give out a special teams personnel book, and then during the week we'd have scouting reports. So you think about it, it's a lot of work. You have a guy doing all this as a special teams coordinator. So I go back to the beginning piece. You know, that special teams guy that wants to be a head coach, you know, he's doing all this stuff. And then he's got to worry about every team, and he's got to worry about every personnel piece. He's got to worry about everything going on. So, all right, so moving on. Next is our scat period. All right, so we'll talk about scat and punt. So I'm just going to erase this for a second. So the scat period, where TCU, was our ending period. So I'm going to show you right here, is this right here would be what we would do. We used to, at Iona, sorry, I'm walking back and forth because I want you to be able to see all this. At Iona, when I worked for Coach, we used to come in on Sundays. At William Patterson, I didn't have the option to come in on Sundays because of time constraints and staffing and so on and so forth. So we used to do what we call TCU Sunday. This is when I was at Iona. Basically, what this individual period was, you had 2 5-minute segments. So understand this when we talk about how specialized you have to be. You have a 10-minute individual segment. You have 10 minutes. You did 5 minutes and 5 minutes. So let's say you were going to do punt and kickoff return and your group period at the end of practice, 8 and 7. You did 5 minutes of punt and 5 minutes of kickoff or kick return, whatever it is. And they had individual stuff. So when I show you this, you'll see here, this is pretty in depth. Call it TCU Sunday. You got on the left there, you got the minutes. You got the part of the field that says scoreboard side. All right, scoreboard side there, where you are. What the drill is. It's a red zone cover drill. What the emphasis is. Punter lines at the 40 line, 40-yard line. Coffin corner kicks. Who's involved? Snappers, punters, headhunters, and what coach? Pasegna and Ranella. And you did this for every single day. And all the coaches had this. The coaches had this, and you put this up in the locker room, so everybody knew what was going on. There was no questions. Nobody can ever say, well, I don't know where I was supposed to go. I hated that. It's not possible. We were burning trees down left and right with all this paperwork and guys saying, no. So we cut that out. That was one of the first things we cut out. Called it, in our program, it was be accountable, be responsible. Accountability and responsibility. It's you're accountable to the team and you're responsible. So now you have your punt. So what you did was you had all the coaches involved in punt. So you had 5 coaches. Everybody was involved. Now, mind you, for this period, everyone was involved. Head coach, all the coordinators, everyone. So you had 5 different things going on within this 5 minutes. So for punt, you may have snappers. Snappers snapping to a coach. Timing. You may then, on the other end of the field, have a coach coming in and like he's coming in a block, and the punter is working on trying to move to the side to get the punt off. Then in the far end, maybe you have R1, R2, and R3, the right side, working on their steps against different twists. On the other end, you got the left side working against twists. against different looks. Down far into the field, you had gunners working on coming down and catching standing in front and behind a guy that you had all this stuff going on in 5 minutes. So now, mind you, the field had to be set up prior to all this stuff happening. So the field's all set up. Whistle goes. We're going to TCU TCU punt. Boom, everyone knows where they got to go. And now, once again, you want to avoid that lag time. So everyone goes where they go. Boom, you do it. As soon as that clock ends, we used to use the scoreboard during practice. As soon as that horn goes off, boop, we're going to TCU B. We're going to TCU kick return. Now, same thing. Now different guys are going different places. Different coaches are doing different things. Now for kick return, you may have the front wall guys working with a coach. You may have the back wall guys working with a coach. You may have returners working on maybe handoffs on fake reverses. You may have another set of returners working on catching. One guy catches, one guy in front the block. You may have kickers working on sky kicks. So everybody's involved. Because at the end of the day, I talked about before, you got your first level, you got your second level, you got a third level, and then you got to have subs. So you got to go 4 deep. I know I said it's 3 deep, you probably got to go 4 deep. Because the last thing you do on Saturday, on game days, especially, you got to go, oh shit, first guy's out, we're using the second guy. All right, third guy just got hurt. Okay, now who's going to be the second guy? Well, let's move the guy from the left side. No, let's get another guy in there. So that's what we called that's what you do during individual. Now, mind you, you have this. You talk about being detailed, and like I said, I'm not going to say that I'm like a guru when it comes to special teams. Worked with a lot of really good ones, but I'm very detail organized in what I do. I don't take things for granted. I just don't do them for the sake of doing them. So when I decide to do this, when you decide to commit to this, you got to be detailed. So there's no gray areas, none. So you had this. You had TCU Saturday, TCU Sunday, and guess what? You had TCU Tuesday. You had TCU Wednesday. You'll see as the week went on, it was maybe a little bit less because you're getting closer to the game day. And then TCU Thursday. And TCU Thursday a lot of times was optional because you got a lot more time to do each special teams. So, the first 3 days are the most important. So that's, hopefully you get something out of that. I mean, that, like I said, that's something I got, and I ran with it, and it was great. All right, so last thing I talked about is punt. So your punt team. All right, so I'm going to draw it up this way. Now, I just drew up C's of corners or gunners, call them whatever you want. We used to do R3, count them in from right to left. So R3, R2, R1. We had certain builds we wanted. So, inside here, we were able to get away with maybe tight ends or inside linebackers, heavier guys that weren't as agile. But out here, you needed guys that could kick step. So, we would use sometimes strong safeties, sometimes outside linebackers, bandits. We use running backs. We use those types of players out there. And then out here, use guys that could cover. So, could be DBs, could be safeties, could be receivers. We had receivers also that play both ways. This kid's got to be intelligent because he's got to be able to see everything and make changes, and then you got your punter. So when I draw up the block team, I'm going to draw the numbers. We used to number them from right to left. So this is how we used to do it for special teams. So that you had this, you had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and 11. So when we had punt return, those were our positions. So if you were 1 and 10, you were interchangeable. So I'm kind of doing 2 things in one. I'm doing punt return here, and I'm doing punt, but we're just focused on punt right now. All right? So basically what you always had was you always had a gap. Everyone always had a gap. So here was his gap. 4 was in this gap. So let's see. 5 was in the A. 4 was in the B, 3 was in the C, and 2 was in the D. He was essentially outside. Going the other way, 6 was in the A, 7 the B, 8 the C, 9 the D. So, everyone had a gap where they were playing outside shade is where they played, but they played in the gap and they were playing on an outside shade. So, what we used to do is, real simple. I'm going to keep it real simple today because we are running out of time and I want to keep it to that time we talked about. So, what we used to do here is we would, our personal protector would make a call. He'd go 8 up, 8 up. Okay, that meant that there was 8 up. Obviously, these guys are out wide. So he had 8 up. He'd go 8 up, 8 up, even. Whatever he said it twice. So everyone heard it. He'd say it to the he'd come up and go, 8 up, 8 up, even. Red, set. That was his call. Now, red told everyone what the protection was. Set, the snapper then would hold for a half a second and snap the ball. So we did like red, for example, we had a red protection, we had a white protection, and we had a blue protection. Well, red was to the right, and blue was to the left, and white was if they were balanced. Okay? So if there was a red, it was probably an overload right. If it was a blue, it was probably an overload left. And if it was a white, it was probably what you see right here. So in this case, he would say 8 up, 8 up, even, white, set. So that meant we were base, okay? And what we did was, because the personal protector was lying here, because we had a righty punter, he's responsible for this gap. Which then meant that 1, 2, and 3 was responsible for 1, 2, and 3. We kept our center had the block, or at least chip, so he was responsible after the snap to get into this gap, and 1, 2, and 3 was responsible for 1, 2, and 3. And that was our base against an 8 up look. Our personal protector, and where his depth was at about 4. Our punter was about 10 or 11. It was 10.5. It varied. We tried to keep it about as close to 10.5, 11 as we could. And then that's what we had. So everybody, we had, and it was a different technique, and I'll teach you the technique sometime, but like our guys were always like, if you were on the right side, your inside foot was up. Inside foot was up, outside foot was back, so on the snap of the ball, you could kick step, we told them to kick, but just like they were playing offensive line. You're in a good football position with your inside hand here, so you kick 1, 2. So we used to do a drill where they did it really slow. Kick 1, kick 2. And they had to be on the same line with each other. Once again, we did that. Why? Just like I talked about with protection last week at Empty. We took steps away because we want to see what they're going to do. They may want to do games. They may want to twist. They may want to drop. We don't want to attack them, because if we attack them and we miss, you got a punt block. And you got a game changer. So you're here. You kick 1, 2, inside to outside. You're always blocking inside to outside. So this guy here is responsible for the 4. So if his inside leg was up and he went here, 2, 3, and that put him here. Well, now as this guy came, he could block him. If this guy ducked underneath, who's here, and he stepped and he ducked underneath, he takes his inside leg that's up, he could power step and take him. We didn't switch. You weren't switching like on the offensive line. So if this happened, most likely this was happening, personal protector would have to step up and block him. Personal protector was the only person that would step up, because he had to block the first thing that came. Because this guy, essentially, if he got a free release, we wanted to block him at about 2. If the personal protector was at 4, we always told him we want you to split the difference. Make contact at 2. So you got R2 here has 3, R3 has 2. These guys were staggered, so these guys were on the line of scrimmage. We told R3, put your left foot on the heel of R2's right ankle. So he was kind of set back a little bit away from the line of scrimmage. So now when he took his 2 steps back, 3 steps back, he'd be a little bit deeper. He'd be here. So you had a wall form like this. You had a wall formed. So they couldn't get to you if you did what you had to do. And, occasionally you get a guy that, he kick steps once and he engages. He kick steps and turns his shoulders. He kick steps and bends over. You're going to get beat. Sink your hips. And we did drills in those indie period. So I talked about that TCU period earlier. So here you go. Here's TCU punt. You got one guy working on snapping to this guy. Timing, that's one. Two, maybe the personal protector's involved. Probably not. Two, you had R1, R2, R3 personal protector involved in protection against four guys somewhere on one part of the field. You got another personal protector maybe involved on this end of the field. Or you just had those guys work on the other end of the field. So here's two, here's three. Four with these guys. So you had four stations set up on the field. And this, you figure now you had 50 some odd guys doing it. The only guys that were never really involved were the O-line and the D-line. We did have some linemen that were agile enough that could get here in the middle, but that's what you had. So now if you did it in Indy, if these guys practiced getting off the ball and getting down and playing behind and in front, then when you went to team, you didn't have wasted reps. Because it wasn't like they didn't know what they were doing. Because they should have been paying attention. And that's how guys moved up and down the depth chart. We didn't play around with that. You weren't paying attention, so you're not a starter on offense, you're not a starter on defense, your chance is special teams. You don't care about special teams, you're at the bottom. Now you got to work your way up. So that's kind of that. So, so you had your white protection, which is what this is. White just meant you had an even front. It was balanced. Your personal protector was to the right. If for some reason you had your personal protector to the left, because you had a lefty punter, well, it'd be the other way around. Personal protector would be here. He'd be responsible for 6. L1, L2, L3 got 7, 8. Snapper's got 5. Or 1, or 2, or 3's got 2 to 4. Nothing changes. All right? If you got red, really quick, I'll show you overload. And then we're going to finish, because we are on time. Show you an overload real quick. We'll give you red. Okay? So red would be, you had 1, 2, 3, 4. So you may get something like this. I'm sorry. You get more head up. You get 5, 6, 7 outside, head up 8, outside 9, 10, and 11. Okay? So red meant you had a man side and a zone side. Okay, you had a man side and a zone side. Okay? So if this look came out and your overload left, he'd come out and go 8 up, 8 up, overload left, overload left. The color set. So that just meant what we were doing from a protection standpoint. So if red meant that you're a man to the right, you were zoned to the left. The color meant with a side you were man to. So if you were overload left, as you are here, okay, if you had this case, you got 3 up on the right, that's your man side, you got your 5 to your left, you could call it red. It means your right side is man, your left side is zone. So what had to happen was the personal protector had to move over here. These guys most likely played man up, same thing, inside leg up, 1, 2, 3, build a wall, 1, 2, 3, build a wall, 1, 2, 3, create that wall, and they're responsible here, man on. Now what you did was you had 5 blocking 5 to the left. You always, the way it was always done, or the way we did it was, we tried to keep it where L3 had this, roughly, L2 had this, the center had this, he had this gap, and the personal protector had the B gap. So there were zones. So he had the A, he had the B, he had the C, he had the D, and now he went to the E gap, which is one guy will come up wider. So you really had to work these because you get a lot of switches, a lot of twists. You get this, you get that. So they have to work on switching. You know, maybe stepping down. Oh my God, switch, switch, switch. You got to switch the guy as opposed to following him. And over here, you worked on that switch concept as well. Okay, so once again, red meant where the man side was. Man side was right because they had 3 up. So once again, personal protector, now he's on the right side. Here, this is what his call looks like. He go 8 up, 8 up. Overload left. As soon as he says overload left, he now moves to the other side. Overload left. Red, red. Set. Now he may delay a half a second. So red now told the right side that they were man. They had no help. R1, R2, R3 had 2, 3, and 4. And it told everyone else from the center over that they had some sort of a zone concept. They all had an area that they had to step to. So you practice this in individual, because then it looked more fluid in team. So the center knew I got to step to the A because it was too hard for him to get anywhere else. L1, you know, we may tweak this. We may say L1, you get here and you get there, but our personal protector, you know, we had no problem with him trying to get into this gap, and then having L1 block the B. So you had personal protector had C, and now your L2 and L3 had D and E. And the reason why was in case you had this little twist game going on. And then the opposite to this was if you had blue, your man side was to the left. If these 3 were over here and you had 5 over there, that meant everyone knew that man side left, zone side right, personal protector moves to the right, and so on and so forth. And I'll get more in depth with this next week, but I want to spend a good amount of time, and we'll finish on that note. I wanted to talk about, you know, we talked about the time you got to spend. I mean, it's 40 minutes. I mean, we just went through a ton of stuff. I mean, you need like 3 hours. You got to be time on task. You got to be detail oriented if you want to be a special teams coordinator. You cannot be somebody that's all over the place. And you got to make sure that not only do the coaches involved know what they're doing, you got to make sure the players know what they're doing, and on top of that, you got to make sure that the scout teams know what they're doing, because you don't have enough time. If you got 8 and 7, you got 8 minutes in your first 8 minutes a team for special teams to get this done. You got to get this set up. You got to get that set up. You got to get everyone where they need to be. You got to get a guy on the cards. This is what we got. You got a guy in the back coaching them up. You got all the coaches standing by their positions, and you run. You're trying not to get any block punts. None. That was something we prided on in special teams. No block punts. And then obviously there's other goals. We'll talk about them at another point. But once again, appreciate your time. The Super Bowl weekend. Another video went a little bit longer than normally. Thanks to my boy Frankie Flora for setting everything up, and my little one Dominic for also helping him out. And once again, please subscribe, like, hit the bell. And if you could write something in the comments about what we talked about or a question you have, any comments in that little section under the video between now and next Saturday, you'll qualify for some free giveaways. And if you know me anyway, you know that I'm a giveaway guy. I always have been. So I got some good giveaways, a lot of contacts, so good stuff. So hopefully you got something out of our special teams. Once again, Head Coach's Corner. We call it Head Coach's Corner because I was a head coach for 10 years. So Head Coach's Corner. Chalk Talk with Coach Flo. Enjoy the Super Bowl. Have a good day.